don't want this job. So I thank you for dealing with it. I thank you for your interest in the community. I thank the citizens of the community that put the effort that they do into this community to make it what it is. And I hope that they continue. And I will do my part to continue. Since serving on the Planning Commission, the fact of the matter is, after 3.5 years of shepherding through a master plan, I wanted nothing more to do with community discourse. And as far as I'm concerned, if I never spoke before the community, it would be fine for me again. But I had to make these comments today. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate those comments. I might even have them printed out and framed. That doesn't happen very often. The last speaker to have signed up. Staff, do you have any comments, observations? Did I miss somebody?
You sure did.
Let me see. Did you sign?
Kirby Klein, right down at the end of the list.
Okay, Mr. Klein. You wrote it in. I'm sorry, I was looking for check marks. Come, yes, sir. Come on up.
Board of County Commissioners, distinguished guests, managers, ladies and gentlemen. I can find nothing in the federal regulations that says that this FBO, considered FBO, has to be led by the sponsoring agency. Has to be led. I dealt with federal grants for 25 years, 6 years in the Office of the Secretary of Interior as a Special Program Manager. There's nothing in those regulations that granting that means that you cannot justify and oppose the letting of any privilege. To justify it, and that's all that's necessary. The present FBO, in my view, is doing a good job and is barely getting by. They employ 19 people. They have an obligation to the general public, whether they land here or not. That's the aviation public, whether they land at the airport or not, so they have to maintain certain hours. Those are described in aviation documents. This costs them money. The comparison that a public entity like the FBOs at an airport are similar to a downtown restaurant is false. A person entering into any entrepreneurism in a public square in downtown, any city, does so by their personal initiative, not by invitation of a government entity. Therefore, they are different. The subject to failure is obvious in any case. The subject to failure at an airport is obvious in any case. Grant privileges are based on the success of what the entity is entertaining. If they fail in private business, that's a tough situation. If they fail under a sponsored situation, then there's a further liability. I view this particular procedure as premature because of the business at the airport, the lack of business, I should say. And I will say that in future, there is no guarantee to anyone that I can see of exclusive right. I think it's understood that by all entities that the businesses there right now should have the right and privilege of earning its way and paying its bills without a competitive atmosphere where both entities, in this case it would be two, would be enter into failure.
Mr.
In fact,
Klein, would you suggest then that we tell Avis Rent-A-Car, Hertz Rent-A-Car, National Enterprise that there can only be one rental car agency, or that we tell Horsefly Brewery that they need to go away, that only Jetway Cafe can operate on the airport, or that Telluride Express and any other limousine service, that there not be competition on our airport?
I believe that those entities came to the airport and asked for the privilege. I don't believe that they were solicited. Thank you for your comments. Thanks for the time to make these comments.
Well, this was an unsolicited application, and I believe you know that. All right. That concludes the Mr. Brown. One additional question, and then I believe that we will have let this run its course.
I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make one comment relative to something that you mentioned early on, that this was a long-term public process. I would like to point out respectfully that this has been a 10-plus month process if you begin the clock in early June. And today we're at the 14th of April, and there essentially hasn't been any public discussion. All there has been is no answers to the questions that certain members of the public have brought up. So, you know, given the fact that we just got the agreement yesterday, that we haven't seen the response to the RFP from Majestic, that lots of folks in the community haven't had the opportunity to review these documents, certainly not the response from Majestic.
Roger, do you have a question or a comment?
Well, I did indicate it was a comment, Mr. Chairman. My question is to please entertain the 30-day period for the release of the information from Majestic Jet in response to the RFP, so that the public can review both that and the proposed agreement, and then get back to you with additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reamer, could you just briefly once again go over our responsibilities under the grant assurances and federal aviation rules and guidelines? Just want to make sure that everybody understands what those are. And relative to our obligations.
Mr. Chairman, part of the reason why I provided the information I did in my opening remarks was to help frame the decision and the factors that you reasonably can consider in accordance with your obligations under the grant assurances. So in short summary, not to belabor the points I made before, you do own and operate this facility. You act as the proprietor and the operator and the sponsor of this airport. You are a landlord looking at a prospective tenant. At the same time, you are bound by and burdened by statutory and contractual obligations to the Federal Aviation Administration, and those bound your and constrain your flexibility in what might otherwise be a more traditional landlord-tenant relationship. The two specific obligations that I mentioned before are the obligations to make the airport available for aeronautical activities, including commercial aeronautical activities, on reasonable terms and without unjust discrimination, and the prohibition on granting exclusive rights directly or indirectly. Again, you have the ability to, or the responsibility to negotiate in good faith for the lease of suitable space to those who are willing and qualified to lease it. And while you have multiple considerations that you can, multiple factors that you can consider in determining whether or not to enter into any particular agreement, you are not, as a matter of your grant assurances, able to consider market demand as one of the factors to consider. If there's anything else that you feel that I missed or information that you'd like, please let me know.
Thank you. Gentlemen, any questions? You, would, sure. Okay. Public hearing is still open, so.
I do have a question, just as an example. If we were to entertain like a 2-week continuance to give the public a chance to review this and ask any questions at the final meeting, would that create an issue for Majestic if it were granted in moving forward? Would it be a critical situation, or would it?
I'm not privy to the finances of this operation. I'm more of an operator, aircraft operator, FBO manager. If it was a financial issue, I can't speak to that. I'm sorry.
Ron?
Yeah, I have some comments I'd like to make. Just from the questions and the individuals who came forward, which I thank very much for coming forward and expressing their amendment rights to go ahead and have the right to say what's on their mind. One of the things that I'm reminded of as we've gone through this process is that there's more than one way to FBO. By that I mean the prime cut of being an FBO operator usually revolves around the fuel. But that's not necessarily so, but it's probably the main facets. But that doesn't mean that if the present FBO operator doesn't and will continue to provide good service, that people will use the other operator. That doesn't, but it is sort of suspect that there so much is being made about the fact that they're so fearful of competition that, you know, there's much to be is there much being done about nothing, or is there a serious flaw in their model? And perhaps there is. I can say without a doubt that I've stayed out of the entire process. We have an excellent staff. I have a lot of faith in the people who are putting the elements of our agreement together, from the airport manager, the legal staff, as well as the staff that we have in Montrose County that played a part and worked with the manager to go ahead and review and put together the lease, during which we didn't have anything to do with it. That's the truth. One thing that did come to mind as this was all happening is people were asking me, earlier on, was this thing solicited by the county? I most assuredly can say by from my standpoint, no. However, I did have some people that I know that have airplanes that use such things make the comment to me that they thought that maybe the request for the proposal was originated from the way Black Canyon treated their customers. And that's totally unsolicited, but I think it's important that people know that, Black Canyon didn't really, probably carry the torch of good stewardship and taking care of their customers in each and every instance. And evidently that was true. People are worried that Black Canyon's getting by, just barely getting by the skin of their teeth, and they're not doing well. And I really appreciate their concern and love